Welcome back to a unplanned video that I'm kind of going to have to throw together as fast as I can. Kind of don't like having to put so many videos so close together, but this is a bit of a timely one, so I need to get it out. And that is to say that I mostly take back what I said about the Roadhog rework. You missed it, I gave my quick and dirty day one takes, and I didn't like it. It seems like overall the reception has been mixed, but generally, at least amongst the more experienced players, it's been positive, which completely caught me off guard, to be honest. But the reason why I'm going back on my word isn't because, oh, actually I just judged the rework wrong. It's because the devs did something unexpected. I went basically a whole day playing recently where I was baffled. After the last few games of having nothing but misery on Hog, suddenly every game was so much more enjoyable and it felt like I had so much more impact. And yet the characters seemed the same, but something just felt different. And I couldn't tell if I really just had gotten so unlucky with my first few games on Roadhog. But then, I found out that I didn't even realize, but they had sneakily actually already hotfixed in a buff for Roadhog. Literally only, I think, 2 days after the rework came out, which I'm gonna take that. That's gotta be a new Blizzard World record. Pun intended. So if you didn't catch them, the buffs were, honestly, really good. I give them a 9.9 out of 10. They increased the damage reduction while using Take a Breather from 30 to 40%. They made it so using all of Take a Breather now heals 500 health instead of 450. They made it so using it all up now takes 2.5 seconds rather than 3, which is technically a buff and a nerf. It's a buff because you heal faster now, and you still heal the same amount, if not more. But it's a nerf because now you get less damage reduction before you run out of Take a Breather to use. Obviously, this just doesn't last as long now. And the last change is that now recharging from empty takes 10 seconds instead of 12. Now don't get me wrong, this was a 9.9, not quite a 10. My one issue, I think that 10 seconds is still kind of longer of a recharge, and I probably would have been happy to throw away the 450 to 500 buff and the 3 to 2.5 buff for the sake of getting that recharge time down to 8 seconds. That being said, that is literally the only thing I would do differently, and other than that, perfect patch, no notes, you fix the character. To be completely honest, I think I was even wrong about one thing, and that was I thought he would also probably need damage buffs. Even though I acknowledge he already had good damage, I feel like all Roadhog has going for him anymore is good damage. And considering that he already has pretty stiff competition in Orisa, Zarya, and Sigma, I wasn't really sure if Roadhog's damage was going to cut it. But I've got to say, now that he's actually holding his own a little better and surviving a little bit longer, it's indirectly led to me doing far more damage on the character and feeling like he doesn't really need the buffs so much anymore. Because, well, at the end of the day, you gotta get close to do good damage with Hog, and before I couldn't even get close without exploding. And now I can actually get close, I can actually get in there, I can actually be on the front lines and fight with my team and not get exploded from full health in the space of under 2 seconds. So yeah, buffs are all really good all around, and I want to be a little bit optimistic with this video. That being said, I did want to follow up my takes on the rework and explain why I still have some negative feelings. If I'm being completely transparent, I still think pre-rework Hog was better. And I know that that's going to be an unpopular take, and I'm honestly not even too invested in convincing all too many of you, because I realize I'm probably not going to convince you. But I'm at least going to explain why I think the old Hog was better, and I'm going to explain why I'm not so mad anymore, because, well, don't get me wrong, I want the old Hog back, and if I could, I would just go back to the Hog 1.0 as people have been calling it, even though it's probably like the 7th iteration of Hog, the Hog we had before this, but whatever. Hog 1.0 we'll stick with. So anyway, while yes, I would go back to Hog 1.0 if given the choice, I'm not so mad in the moment because, well, in fairness, now the reworked Hog does feel very playable. There are some upsides to the reworked Hog that the old Hog didn't have. And, well, I have to admit, a lot of the big issues I have with the reworked Hog aren't like here and now issues, they're long-term this scares me issues. First things first, you know how I've been mentioning that in this more miserable meta, it's been the case that basically the best thing you can do if you're anything that isn't a support is to pick whatever bullies the tank the hardest, even if you are a tank. And you know how that was a big reason why I thought that Roadhog, even before this rework, was actually a lot better than people gave him credit for? Because he was good at being a tank buster, and he was extremely stupidly hard to kill if you just played him very patiently and far back. Well, I think they just leaned even harder into his tank buster kind of aspect with this new rework. At the end of the day, Pigpen makes it so that you get one-shots, yes, easier, but you get them less often because you now have to rely on a 12-second cooldown rather than a 6-second cooldown. In fact, you need both the 12 and the 6-second cooldown for the insta-kill, so In some ways, it's not really an 18-second cooldown, but you know what I mean, it adds up to 18. But now, when you get this one-shot, quote-unquote, it even works on tanks. Not literally one-shotting them, but effectively being hooked into a pig pen if you don't have direct LOS of your healers after the hook so that you can still get healed while you're in the pig pen is a death sentence to 90% of the tanks in the game. If you get hooked into a pig pen and the hog is good at the game, you probably aren't getting out of that pig pen no matter what you do. So that's the first thing that kind of concerns me. The second thing is something which I could make an entire other video on, and once again, maybe I will, because I'm starting to get a bit concerned. But there's a tendency that started probably a long time ago, but I began to notice it more obviously by around Season 3, where the longer that Overwatch 2 has gone on, I have noticed more and more that it seems like, whether intentional or not, they're trending towards, whenever they change or rework characters, making it so they have less and less skill expression, and more their effectiveness is based on whenever they have their buttons available or not. Something which is not in the player's control. And the reason why this is a problem is because that is kind of what contributes to these games in Overwatch, where it feels like whether you win or lose doesn't depend on how well you play, but rather what characters your teammates happen to pick. And I mean, this is a common problem. Some people don't notice it a whole lot just because they don't pay a whole lot of attention to team comps, but if you do, sometimes I join a game and the second I join, I'm like, yeah, 90% chance we lose this. And I mean, I don't leave, I don't rage, I'm not gonna argue with people and tell them get the fuck off that character or whatever. But I won't lie, it is very common that if I walk into a game and I see my supports on Mercy Lucio, and I see the enemy supports on like Anna Brig, I'm like, well then, I'm gonna just autopilot this game, I guess. Like, not gonna get invested in trying to win this. Like, I'm gonna play, obviously, I'm not gonna be a spoil sport, but like, I am not gonna sweat this game because there is no winning this game. If we simply have a support duo that insists on playing Mercy Lucio or Zen Lucio, or maybe Mercy Olari when we got a high resource tank that needs a lot of healing output to survive, like Ramatra or Roadhog, then yeah, it can be pretty obvious to see when something like that happens. Well, it doesn't matter if this Mercy and Olari actually are really good at the game. They could be really good at the game. They could genuinely not be the ones at fault necessarily for us losing. They could be doing a good job. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. They simply chose Mercy and Olari, and so we lose. This is obviously not a fun dichotomy, but it's kind of how the game has been for a while. And I feel like a lot of this is due to the fact that, well, the more and more the game just leans towards whether you're allowed to do things or not depends on whether you have buttons or not, the more and more it becomes, well, you don't actually control the game. Realistically, the game is just an extremely overly elaborate finite state machine, where one button goes off, and the response to that button is for you to press one of your buttons. And then another button goes off in response to your button. And so the response to that is for your teammate to press this button. And it's not really a thing where you have to think about it. Anti-heal comes down, Kiriko hits Suzu. Orisa presses Fortify, Hog uses his ult to kill the Orisa. These are examples of interactions where it doesn't really take a whole lot of thought. It's not really a big, skill thing. It's just when they do this, you do this. I'm not even saying that you're dumb if you do it. I mean, you are supposed to do that. That's the right play most of the time. That's just how the game works. But I feel like the more and more we make changes like this, the more the game literally just boils down to a finite state machine, where it's just like, well, someone's going to walk in and press a button, and then this is going to happen when that button is pressed, which is going to cause this to happen, which means another button will be pressed, and another button, and the team that loses is just the first one to need to press a button that they don't have on cooldown yet. So the reason why I bring all this up is because this is my other concern with the Roadhog rework. The fact that the one-shot is now basically dead unless you use Pigpen now means that you are restricted to only being able to get one insta-kill every 12 seconds rather than the every 6 seconds you potentially could have been getting with the old Hog. Now, in fairness, you weren't going to realistically get an insta-kill every 6 seconds, because obviously even if you land every hook, and even if you're throwing out a hook as soon as it's available all the time, you're probably not going to insta-kill everyone you hook. But you'll insta-kill a good amount of them, and the better you are, the more that you'll be able to insta-kill. I got to the point where I could pull off the one shot probably more often than I couldn't pull it off on most of the people that I hooked by the time that I had, was playing like Season 7, early Season 7 Hog before the rework. After I'd had enough time to play him, I got to the point where I could pretty consistently land these one shots, even though the true one shot where you just hook and shoot and there's nothing else to it was dead. Clearly you can see the issue here, where before with the old Hog, yes, you still were reliant on a cooldown, hook, but hook was a cooldown that was up every 6 seconds. That's extremely quick. And so I hardly even really count that as something that limits your skill all too much, because, I mean, 6 seconds is a very short cooldown for such a pivotal ability. But the whole reason it's allowed to be so short is because of the fact that a hook is not a guaranteed kill. You actually have to be, good at the game to get the kill afterwards. And so that establishes a difference between a serviceable hog player who knows what the character does and understands what he's expected to do, but has very little to no experience with how to actually execute it and is just doing the obvious, and a hog player that's actually really good at the game. The hog player that's actually really good at the game is going to be insta-killing, 3/4 of the time when they land one of their hooks. So they're going to be getting a lot more kills. However, the other hog that just knows what they're supposed to be doing on hog, but doesn't really know a whole lot about how to do it and the best way to go about it, they will probably land a bunch of hooks, but they probably will get very few kills off of their hooks. They'll probably just get a bunch of grab, pull, shoot, oh, you still lived, let me chase you, oh, now I got antied, I gotta run away. However, now with the reworked hog, the gap has been closed. If you're a serviceable hog who doesn't really know a whole lot about how to play the character, but just the basics of what you're intended to do, then you know that you drop a pig pen, you hook someone into the pig pen, and you shoot. There you go. One shot. You get the one shot basically every time now, unless you miss your hook, which, I mean, that's fair enough. You're always going to miss hooks. Even good hog players miss hooks from time to time. But you know what I mean? Obviously, that was always there. That's nothing new. Unless you miss your hook, you're always going to get the insta-kill. You just trap, hook, shoot. There's not really a whole lot of skill involved there. I mean, there's a very basic, low-level skill involved, but definitely nothing demanding. And so that means now, if you imagine a god-tier hog player and a serviceable hog player both in the same lobby, what's the difference here? Both of them can only get a one-shot if they land a hook and pull someone into a pig pen. And both of them know that's what they're supposed to be doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's no difference. As I say, the better hog player will probably land more of their hooks, which will probably lead to more kills. And the better hog player probably would find slightly better spots for their pig pen, so they have a lower chance of being destroyed before they can hook someone into it. But already that's a slightly rare occurrence anyway, that someone actually bothers to destroy it, instead of just getting hooked into it before they can react. So overall, now the difference between an extremely skilled hog player and a serviceable hog player has gone from significant to marginal. Before, it was the bad hog player will get kills off of hooks very rarely, but still probably be able to land a decent amount of hooks, and the good one will get kills off of hooks almost all the time and super often. And now it's going to be, well, the good hog player can still get a kill off of their hooks every 12 seconds, but they can't get a kill every 6 seconds anymore, and the bad hog player can also get a kill every 12 seconds off of their hooks. So there's not really much of a gap, is there? Again, the main factor there is just the fact that the good player will land more hooks. It's kind of sad to see that the skill gap is closing even further on a character that already a lot of people misunderstood as low skill, and I'm not going to say Hog is the hardest character in the game, but once again, when you actually get into all the esoteric nonsense around hook tech, it is actually quite difficult to pull off. And as I say, I think hog positioning is some of the hardest positioning in the game, or at least was. I'm not sure if I'd still stick by that now, undecided. But yeah, I not only think this reduces skill expression, but I think it also leads to something which I think a lot of people have a vibe for, but struggle to put into words. You know I fucking hate people who try to go like, oh, back in the old days, everything was great with Overwatch, actually. We never had extremely awful balance patches like this. Because seriously, back then the game was not more balanced, it was worse on balance back then. But as much as I hate giving the Overwatch 1 nostalgists any points, there is something I gotta give to them. It is absolutely true that in the past, you could see people pop off more. It was more common that someone who was simply good at the game could shred apart an entire team and get a 5k or a 6k. It could be one of those core memories that just makes you think, yeah, that's why I love Overwatch. I love Overwatch because I remember this one clip of this Genji dash in triple shuriken, blade nano, and then takes out the whole team, all 6 of them. And you don't get moments like that anymore in Overwatch 2 for the most part. And a lot of people are like, why is that? And I think a lot of it is, again, this cooldown thing. Because if you're a really good player of a certain character, but your character is simply made so that you're not allowed to get killed if you don't have your buttons, and your buttons take time to come back, well, it's no surprise you're not allowed to get these cool 4K or 5K moments, because, well, that would require you to have buttons for everyone you need to kill. And when you press the button to get the first kill, there's your button gone. To get the second kill, you're going to have to do it without a button when you're playing a character most likely that basically is designed to only be able to allow to kill people when they have their button ready. And once again, they've made Hog even more like that by making it so that now he's relying on 2 cooldowns to do his one shot, rather than just simply being good with Hook. And that second cooldown taking twice as long to come back as Hook does. The other thing about this rework I'm not big on is a bit more of a vague thing, so I didn't want to make it the main focus on this video, but I will add in, petty as it may seem, I do think that people are right to think this rework's just kind of lame and not Roadhog. Not even like, oh, it's a stupid idea to give him a trap, just like, why? Like, you could have done so much. And in fairness, I do want to be mostly positive in this video, but I can't ignore the elephant in the room. If you aren't aware, the Roadhog rework was first mentioned in fucking January. That was the time when they first promised it. That was 11 months ago. And if I remember correctly, the plan was, don't worry guys, we wanted to do a Roadhog rework for Season 2 when we nerfed him, but clearly we had to nerf him fast. So we brought out the nerfs early, and so he's not got his rework yet, but don't worry guys, we're going to rework him for Season 3. And then Season 3 came and no Roadhog rework. And then they said, don't worry guys, we're going to rework him for Season 4. And then Season 4 came and no rework. And I don't even think they bothered mentioning it in Season 5. So Season 5 came and no rework. Season 6 came and no rework. And then they were like, okay guys, sorry about the wait. Don't worry, Season 7, he's getting his rework. And then Season 7 trailer drops and, oh, it's coming mid-Season 7, not start of Season 7. Okay then, don't worry guys, he's coming mid-Season 7. And then we get the news, he's delayed and he's coming 2 weeks after mid-Season 7, and it's like, oh my god, like, come on, man. Like, it's one of those things where, like, I don't want to get too hung up on it, because in the end we got there, but, like, holy shit, man. You can't tell us you're going to rework a character, make us wait a whole fucking year for the rework, break so many promises about when you're going to do it, and then when the rework finally drops, you gave a character a trap which feels like it doesn't fit at all with their kit, and just feels like a, why did you give him this? And the actual gameplay loop of Hog feels almost exactly the same as it was before. Like, again, I don't hate the new reworked Hog anymore. I think he's fine, but like, man, it's not a whole lot different from the old Hog, is it? Just with less skill expression. At the very least, I got a good laugh out of the fact that I absolutely correctly predicted exactly why this rework took so goddamn long. I knew it wasn't going to be a, oh, it's just so hot, we're just working on such a big change that, you know, we just need all this dev time. I knew the problem was going to be a lack of philosophy. It feels weird to say because it's usually something so esoteric and out there and not important, but I feel like a lack of game design philosophy in terms of Overwatch is one of its biggest issues. And so it does not surprise me at all that basically it sounds like what happened based off the developer interview that Six did with, well, one of the developers for the Roadhog rework. It sounded like the problem was that they basically had no fucking idea what they wanted to do with Roadhog. They just knew they had to change something. And so they experimented with a whole bunch of different rework ideas, an insane amount of different ideas they had to develop, test, and then scrap before they finally came up with the Pigpen one and settled on that as their final idea, which is probably why it took so long, because they had to scrap tons of ideas in the meantime. And we didn't get full depth details on most of these ideas. However, I've got to say, there's one in particular that I remember them mentioning, which I'm like, why didn't you do that? I want that rework. Because Pigpen, it works, but again, it's practically the same character still. And I feel like it didn't really address any of the goals of the rework. You know, I mean, they said they wanted to give him more frontline presence. And it's like, okay, so you decided you would give someone more frontline presence. By giving them a trap, they have to lay down an arm first, which can easily be destroyed if you place it out in the open on the front line. Now, I realize in practice that usually you can hook someone before they can destroy the trap, but even still, that's weird and clunky that you have to do that in the first place, and the trap is intentionally supposed to be used in situations where you don't use it as a trap. You more use it as a button that you're legally obligated to press before you press hook if you want to get the kill. Either way, the idea that I like that they didn't use, I'll give some credit. I think I might have an idea, even though they never said, why they didn't go ahead with this. But I'm gonna say it, I think this would have been a better rework. The idea was to give him a new passive, the Bodyguard passive. This passive would make it so that anyone standing nearby to Roadhog would receive damage resistance simply by him being there, you know, since he's supposed to be a bodyguard. Now don't get me wrong, I am not blind to how this could be scary. Any kind of getting value just for existing without even having to do anything or even press a button is kind of scary to put into this game, and especially damage resistance just for standing near a Roadhog sounds like it could be annoying to deal with. But at the same time, by the same token, I want this passive. You see, let me explain. I think on many other characters in the game, something like this would be poor design. But I feel like on Roadhog specifically, this could have worked perfectly fine. Why? Because I don't think a single character in this entire game gets punished more for poor positioning than Roadhog. And doesn't it sound like it might be a little bit difficult to play a no mobility, huge tank that gets fucking eviscerated by things like BAP window, anti-sleep darts or nades, poke heroes having clear line of sight of him like Soldier or Ashe? If you're stuck playing a tank with no mobility where you have to stick near to your team to get value off of him with his passive, but your team won't necessarily position wherever is safe for you, just wherever is convenient for them, that actually could be a very interesting compromise, where Roadhog positioning, already some of the hardest positioning in the game, becomes even more in-depth because now it's like, okay, I'm not only positioning to make sure I don't die and I don't get hit with 5 antis and chain CC'd into oblivion before I can even breathe, but now I have to figure out how to do that while still being able to get value myself, while also still trying to position nearby enough to my teammates to protect them. And that sounds like a really interesting dynamic that would work really well for the character. Because it's not exactly in the character's identity to be super mobile, but as long as he is going to be extremely slow and extremely easy as a target, you may as well make that part of the difficulty of playing him. You may as well lean into that, because that's a skill set that all Roadhog players who enjoy Roadhog already have had to develop. Having to adapt to circumstances to be able to learn how to position themselves well, despite the fact that they are, of course, such an easy target, who is also basically completely incapable of escaping any kind of dangerous situation. At least not with a whole lot of foresight. And of course, you all know what I would like to do to Roadhog, the whole idea of giving him a kick at the end of the hook, so that you can not insta-kill them, but you can kick them in the direction you want after you hook them, to put them in an especially bad spot and have more control over where they end up. Well, with all that said, I think that's most of what I wanted to say off my mind. But hey, for the sake of ending on a positive note, how about I tell you this? There is a little thing I did learn about the new reworked Hog, which I must admit is one of the few things I do really like. It is sad that we lost right click, and yes, I know the new thing is kind of like a right click, the new projectiles, but let's be real, it's not the same. Right click could still insta-kill, this thing can't, but, you know, details. Either way, I did find out something pretty cool about this new primary fire. Those 4 projectiles in the middle, I obviously knew they could headshot, but I didn't really think it would be feasible to headshot all 4 pellets in one shot, especially on smaller head characters with smaller hitboxes, at any range that isn't like point blank. However, as it turns out, it's doable. It's very difficult, but it's doable. Even from like medium range, even some of the kind of range that you see people like Cass play at, you can still get 2-tap kills with Roadhog if you manage to connect all 4 of these pellets to the head. This even worked on Kiriko for me, which was a pleasant surprise. I thought Kiriko's hitbox would be too small. So yeah, being able to 2-tap kill people from a much further range than usual with Roadhog is really nice, and I do think it's balanced considering it is really hard to get all 4 of these pellets all going different directions to headshot the exact same target, especially from any range that isn't point blank. It's absolutely super satisfying to do this, and when you pull it off, it just, ooh, it's so good, especially because usually you get to do it on someone who you tried to hook, but something went wrong, and then it's like, oh no, they're gonna get away, and then you just land the boom, boom, and it feels so good. Well, that's my forced positive note to end on. Hope you guys enjoyed. Probably back to the usual 1 video a week soon. The only reason there was so many videos this week is because, for one, I was kind of half expecting they would delay the Roadhog rework again, so I was kind of not even expecting it to come out now, even though they said they would do it now. So I wasn't prepared to do both the Roadhog video that obviously I already uploaded and the BTD6 video that came up recently, which I was already planning on uploading. And then of course these buffs came in and it just felt like I had to get this out relatively quick. I do still think we're in the dark ages right now for Overwatch 2, but hopefully the future is bright. I'm crossing my fingers. Again, my prediction that I mentioned back in that long mid-season patch video was that Season 9 would be the season where we start to come out of the Dark Age, was my either Season 9 or 10 was my prediction. So hopefully I was being too pessimistic, and hopefully season 8 ends up being the turning point. We'll see.